There was a time when heaven spoke and earth listened. The mountains fell silent, the wind calmed, and even the sound of the waters seemed to kneel before a voice that came from within eternity. It was the sound of the Son speaking to the Father, not in human words, but in vibrations that touched the invisible. It was Aramaic, the language of the heart, the language Jesus used when he withdrew to pray, a language born not only of the lips, but of the soul. When he said Abwûn, he was not simply saying, "Our Father who art in heaven." He was invoking the divine breath that sustains all life, calling the Creator by the name that resonates within the universe itself. Each syllable that emerged from his mouth was like a wave of light, opening portals between time and eternity. What if the words Jesus actually spoke sounded different from what we know today? What if the original sound of his prayer held a power lost in the pages of translations, in the voices of centuries, in the versions that tried to capture the unspeakable? The Aramaic. He spoke was not just a language, it was a spiritual breath. Each word carried with it the rhythm of creation, the pulse of life, the memory of Eden. When Jesus prayed, the spiritual world moved. The air felt lighter, hearts more open, and even silence became sacred. The Lord's Prayer was not written first, it was felt. It was born from the encounter between the human and the divine, from the Son speaking to the Father, in a language that did not separate mind and heart. Aramaic has no dead letters, its words breathe. Abwûn means Father, but also source of existence, he from whom all things proceed. It is a word that does not ask, it acknowledges. It is the echo of life, returning to its source. When Jesus uttered Abwûn, he not only began a prayer but realigned the entire universe to the sound of perfect obedience. Over the centuries, these vibrations were translated, rewritten, and adapted. Aramaic gave way to Greek, Greek to Latin, and Latin to the many languages of the world. But with each translation, a layer of mystery dissolved. The words became more beautiful, but less vivid. The prayer that was once a fire became a formula. What was a revelation became repetition. The sound of heaven was covered by the dust of time. We still repeat Our Father, but do we still hear what Jesus heard when he said Abwûn? The lost sound of heaven is not just a linguistic enigma, it is a spiritual reminder. Jesus did not teach a prayer, but a way of breathing with God. When he said, "Thy kingdom come," he was not speaking of political power or human glory. He was speaking of the invisible kingdom that begins within, in the space where the heart bows and acknowledges the divine presence. In Aramaic, Tete Malkuthak means something like, "May your reign be manifested in all that exists." It is not a request, it is a cosmic declaration. It is the human soul opening itself so that the Creator can reign through it. Imagine the sound of this on the hills of Galilee. The cold wind blowing, the sunset tinting the horizon golden, and Jesus silent, taking a deep breath before uttering the words that would move centuries. The Aramaic flowed from his mouth like light on snow, soft yet irresistible. He didn't just speak to the Father, he united with him. Each phrase was an invisible bridge between the human and the eternal, a music that only heaven fully understood. The original words of the Lord's Prayer are not only older, they are more vivid. When spoken in Aramaic, they sound almost like a chant. Abwûn net kadash shmach, Father of all that lives, may your name be hallowed. There is a natural cadence, an implicit melody, a reverence that comes not from the tongue, but from vibration. These syllables carry the echo of the Creator, shaping man from the dust, the sound of the first breath, the murmur of the stars in formation. But over time, humanity moved away from the original sound. We forgot that the word is a creative force, that sound shapes reality, that "let there be light" still echoes within us, if we know how to listen. When Jesus prayed, he didn't just ask for something, he activated something. He spoke words that aligned the realms, uniting the visible and the invisible. Aramaic was the key to this mystery, because in it, every sound is a divine spark. Some scholars say the Lord's Prayer is the perfect prayer because it contains everything: adoration, submission, forgiveness, dependence, and victory. But in the language in which it was first spoken, it is even more than that. It is a spiritual map. Each line is a coordinate that leads the heart back to the center of God. Lachma desunkanan yomana havlan. Give us the bread we need for each day. In English, it seems like a simple request, but in Aramaic, it is a confession of faith. Sustain us with the divine substance that comes from you. It is not just physical bread, but nourishment for the soul. When we hear the original words, something within us awakens. It's as if the Spirit recognizes the sound of home. It's not nostalgia, it's reconnection. The sound Jesus spoke still exists, echoing throughout the dimensions, waiting for hearts willing to hear it again. It's not about learning an ancient language. It's about remembering the sound of origin, because every word spoken in truth reopens the path to Eden. The mystery of Aramaic is that it doesn't separate the sacred from the everyday. In a single sentence, heaven and earth, body and spirit, tears and glory can exist. Jesus prayed with this unity, and it is this that made his words so vivid. Washboklan haubain, forgive our sins. In Aramaic, this phrase also carries the meaning of free us from the burden of the past. Each expression is a liberation, a thread cutting the bonds of pain. Today, many read the Lord's Prayer as a memento, but for Jesus, it was an experience. He didn't just say it, he lived it. Each line was a state of consciousness. When he spoke the Father's name, he felt his presence. When he asked for bread, he received it. When he spoke of forgiveness, he freed. The original prayer wasn't a plea, it was communion. It was the breath of the soul returning to its source. Perhaps the true miracle of Aramaic lies not in understanding each word, but in allowing oneself to be touched by its vibration. Because even without understanding, something within us recognizes it. It's like listening to an ancient melody and feeling tears without knowing why. The sound of heaven doesn't speak to the mind, it speaks to the spiritual memory. Some say the entire universe vibrates around a primordial frequency, a sacred sound that sustains existence. The ancients called it Aum, the Hebrews called it Ruah, and Jesus manifested it with every word spoken to the Father. When he prayed, the cosmos responded. And perhaps the secret lies there. The power lies not in the form of the prayer, but in attuning to the sound that created it. If we could hear Jesus praying today, we might be surprised by the simplicity and depth of his voice. There would be no rush, no desperation, just surrender. He spoke the words with the weight of one who knew he stood before the Creator, and with the lightness of one who knew he was loved by him. It was the sound of trust, the sound of pure faith, the sound of the Son speaking to the Father. And that sound, Anderson, has never been completely lost. It still echoes in the hearts that pray sincerely, in the tears that fall without explanation, in the moments when silence feels sacred. Aramaic may have vanished from our mouths, but the spirit that inspired it still dwells within us. The lost sound of heaven has not disappeared. It simply waits to be found again. When the heart returns to its knees, when man returns to speak to God, not out of fear but out of love, the sound returns. It is heard not with the ears but with the soul. And in that instant, the Father responds, not in an audible voice, but in peace. Because in the end, Jesus' original prayer isn't just a string of words. It's the sound of love becoming a verb. It's the echo of heaven saying to earth, I am still here. There is something quietly tragic in the way time treats words. They are born pure, charged with soul and meaning, and gradually become coated with layers of translation, interpretation, doctrine, and culture. The original sound dissolves, and what was once a living voice becomes an echo. This is what happened with the Lord's words. The prayer Jesus taught his disciples, spoken in Aramaic on a hillside beneath the Galilean wind, traversed centuries and empires, passing through scrolls, councils, monks, and kings, until it reaches our modern lips, already far removed from the heavenly timbre with which it was first uttered. And yet, the question echoes. Do we still understand what he truly meant? Aramaic was not just an ancient language, it was a bridge between the human and the divine. When Jesus spoke, he didn't just utter sounds, he vibrated spiritual realities. Each word had weight, texture, and a life of its own. Abwûn de Bashmaya, thus began the prayer, a sound lost in our translations as Our Father who art in heaven. But Abwûn is not just Father. It is a term that unites the masculine and feminine of God, the principle and womb of creation, the primordial source. To say Abwûn is to breathe the mystery of a God who generates and sustains, who envelops and inhabits, who is both origin and presence. How many centuries did it take for this meaning to be reduced to a simple word? When Aramaic was translated into Greek, the world was already changing. The Greek language, more philosophical and conceptual, sought precision, not vibrancy. Translation became a bridge, but a stone bridge, solid yet cold. What was pulsating in Aramaic became abstract in Greek. Abwûn became pater, the distant father, the sovereign. The intimate sweetness of the term disappeared, and the first crack formed between the heart and the intellect. What was relationship became theology. What was presence became concept. And when the text reached Latin, the chasm widened. Latin, the language of empire and authority, molded the prayer into the image of power. Pater Noster, now the voice was solemn, priestly, almost imperial. The God Jesus tenderly called upon was clothed in robes and crowns. The prayer born of the simplicity of the earth became the hymn of cathedrals. The living vibration of the desert gave way to the cadence of ritual. The healing word became liturgy. But perhaps what strikes us most is how much this loss has gone unnoticed. Centuries of repetition have ingrained in us the sound of the translation, and we have forgotten the sound of the original. It is as if we have inherited a sacred song, but only the echo of its melody. And yet, deep within us, something recognizes that something is missing. When we recite Our Father who art in heaven, there is a silence between the words, an empty space where the spirit searches for the lost sound. It is in this space that the soul senses that true meaning lies beyond language, beyond the lyrics, beyond time. Scholars who have delved into the roots of Aramaic have discovered nuances that defy our translation. For example, the phrase, "Thy kingdom come," in Aramaic sounds like Tete Malkutak. But Malkutak is not just kingdom. It means manifestation of divine royalty within us. In other words, Jesus was not asking for the kingdom to come from outside, but to emerge from within the human heart. The request was not for a celestial empire, but for an inner transformation. In a single word, Aramaic hid the key to spirituality. God does not come from afar. He awakens from within. Another example is the phrase, "Lead us not into temptation." In Aramaic, the literal translation would be something like, "Do not let us be taken in by the superficiality of appearances." It wasn't just about falling into sin. It was about not getting lost in the deception of the world, not forgetting the essence. How many times have we repeated this phrase without realizing the full scope of its meaning? Each word of Jesus in the original carried multiple meanings, layers of meaning that ranged from the physical to the spiritual, from to the invisible. But perhaps the most moving part is the final one. Deliver us from evil. In Aramaic, al-dilan min bisha can be understood as deliver us from the error of separation. It's not just about asking for protection from external forces, but about being healed of the illusion of being far from God. This is the essence of Christ's message: reconciliation. The original prayer was not a plea for distant help, but a reminder that we have never been separated from the source. Over the centuries, translations softened, adjusted, and adapted. The vivid simplicity of Aramaic was replaced by formalities and liturgical structures. The prayer that arose from the heart of a man in direct contact with the Father was institutionalized, as if the divine required protocol. But God does not speak Greek or Latin. He speaks the language of the soul. And this is what Jesus taught us. True prayer is that which vibrates at the frequency of love. Imagine the moment. The Son, kneeling on the earth, eyes turned to heaven, utters words that not only rise but transform the air around them. Each syllable has the power to move the spiritual realms. The wind falls silent, time bends. He speaks to the Father, and the universe listens. Abwûn de Bashmaya. There is no distance, no fear, no ritual. There is only communion. It is the sound of heaven being heard on earth. But as the Roman Empire expanded and Christianity spread throughout the world, Jesus' words were adapted to the languages of the nations, and with each adaptation, a piece of the original vibration was lost. The strength of Aramaic is that it doesn't separate word and feeling. The word is the feeling. When Jesus said shalem, he didn't just mean peace. He meant wholeness, harmony with all that exists. In Portuguese, only peace remained. The spirit was translated, but the heart got in the way. This is why many who hear the prayer in Aramaic feel something inexplicable, even without understanding its literal meaning. There is something ancient in that sound, something that speaks to the human spiritual memory. It's as if the soul recognizes a forgotten melody, a vibration that connects us to the beginning of everything. The Aramaic language has rhythm, breath, vibration. Each syllable contains the memory of the creative breath. Perhaps this is why, when Jesus said, Abwûn, hearts broke effortlessly, because it wasn't just a word, it was love itself being spoken. Today, when we repeat the Lord's Prayer, we do so mechanically, almost automatically. But if we heard it as Jesus said it, something within us would awaken. It wouldn't just be a prayer, it would be a reunion. The words that time has nearly erased still echo, albeit softly, in every heart that sincerely seeks to reconnect with God. It's like an ancient flame that has never been completely extinguished, just waiting for the right breath to reignite. The truth is that time has not destroyed the essence of prayer. It has merely covered it with dust. And when faith blows away this dust, the light reappears. Rediscovering Aramaic is not an intellectual exercise, it is an act of spiritual resurrection. It is bringing back to life the sound of heaven. Each translation was a human attempt to preserve the divine, but the divine cannot be contained in fixed words. It moves, breathes, and speaks within silence. And it is at this point that the mystery is revealed. What Jesus left was not just a sequence of phrases, but a frequency of love. The true translation of prayer is not in the dictionary, but in the vibration of the praying heart. The Lord's Prayer is not about asking, it is about remembering. It is not about what we want, but about who we already are, children connected to the source. We may never be able to hear the exact sound that came from Jesus' mouth, but we can hear the sound he awakens within us, and that sound is the same. The echo of Aramaic still lives not in the words, but in the essence that pulses between each syllable spoken with faith. Time has tried to erase the sound, but heaven still speaks it in every awakened heart. It was dawn. The world slept, but the sky was awake. The stars seemed to lean toward the earth, as if they, too, wanted to hear what was about to be said. The wind glided over the stones of Galilee, and a silhouette rose in the shadows. The sun, alone, walking through the mist. There were no crowds, no disciples, no noise, only the silence of the universe and a heart that beat in tune with the Father. With each step, the ground seemed to recognize the one who created it. And when he finally stopped, the world stopped with him. Then Jesus lifted his face and pronounced, Abwûn Maya. The sound was soft, almost a whisper, but its vibration pierced the air like light cutting through darkness. It was the language of creation, Aramaic, a speech that didn't simply communicate but united. Each syllable carried spiritual weight, each breath a prayer. Abwûn, Father of all that lives, source of all being, origin of breath. Jesus didn't call upon a distant God. He spoke to the presence that dwelt within and around him. It was intimacy, not formality. It was return, not distance. In that word, there was an embrace between the human and the divine. The scene is simple, but what happens there is cosmic. The earth listens, the wind bends, the silence transforms into a temple. The Son speaks to the Father, and the universe recognizes the voice that called him into existence. In Maya, there is more than in the heavens. There is the idea of a living space, a sacred dimension where everything breathes in God. It is as if Jesus was saying, Father, who art in all, and in whom all things are. No modern translation conveys this pulse. Only Aramaic has the density to convey what the divine heart said in human form. As he prayed, there was no fear, no rush, no repetition. The words flowed like water returning to its source. Abwûn Maya. The timbre of his voice blended with the sound of creation. The prayer was a dialogue between eternities. The Son, still immersed in flesh, spoke with the same love that sustained him before the world existed. There was no ritual, only breath. Each phrase was born from the encounter between silence and spirit. It was prayer before religion, word before the word. Imagine what it was like to hear that. Aramaic, in its living form, is a language that vibrates like a chant. The consonants are soft, the vowels drawn out, the rhythm moving like a heartbeat. When Jesus said, Nethkadash Shmak, hallowed be your name, he wasn't just declaring reverence, he was awakening the sacred in the very air. Nethkadash comes from the root meaning to become luminous. It was as if he was saying, may your name shine through us. Thus, prayer wasn't just spoken, it was experienced. It happened within and without, uniting everything in a single breath. Many imagined Jesus praying in temples, but he preferred the mountains and deserted places. Silence was his altar, the wind his music, and the sky his roof. He sought the Father not out of obligation, but out of love. It was an encounter between a son who knew the world's pain and a father who knew the soul's remedy. In every word there was tenderness, and in every pause, absolute trust. The Son didn't ask, he shared. He didn't beg, he surrendered. And this is the difference between praying and being in prayer. Those who pray speak, those who pray become part of what is said. As he murmured, Tite Malkutak, thy kingdom come, the tone of his voice revealed something few understood. The kingdom was not a future place, but an inner reality. The Aramaic expression conveys the meaning of letting divine royalty blossom within us. In saying this, Jesus was asking for the awareness of God's love to awaken within human beings, that each heart would become a piece of the kingdom. The prayer was, in fact, a spiritual summons, not a formula. He was not calling heaven down, he was calling humanity up. There is an almost invisible part of this scene, the tears. Jesus, even though he was the Word, wept as he prayed, not out of weakness, but out of plenitude. His tears were an expression of the love he felt for humanity, a love that carried the weight of all future pain, but also the hope of all redemption. Each drop was a spiritual seed watering the earth. He knew that soon his words would be repeated for centuries, but not everyone would understand their meaning. Even so, he prayed, because love is not silent, even when the world does not understand. When he said, Lachma de sunkanan yaomana, give us this day our daily bread, he spoke of much more than food. The word lachma comes from the same root as communion and sustenance of the soul. It was a request to receive the spiritual nourishment necessary to live love amidst chaos. The bread was not wheat, it was presence. It was the strength to remain light in a world of shadows. Jesus did not teach a prayer to meet needs. He taught a breath that realigns the soul with the source. Each verse of Aramaic is a reminder. True prayer does not change God, it changes the one who prays. In Aramaic, even the pauses speak. There are intervals that don't exist in translations, breaths where soul and spirit meet. When Jesus was silent between one sentence and another, the silence also prayed. And perhaps it is in this silence that the true power of prayer lies. Communion is not just in the words, but in the presence they awaken. Jesus lived this. He didn't speak to the Father, he spoke with the Father. And this difference changes everything, because whoever speaks to the Father recognizes that he is already before him. Consider the scene, the grey sky, the cold breeze, the distant sound of a stream. He kneels on the ground and presses his face into the dust. His voice is low but firm, with the serenity of one who knows the heart of God. Wah bashlan kaubain. Forgive us our trespasses. The Aramaic sound carries compassion. The word kaubain literally means our debts, but also our deviations from purpose. Jesus asked forgiveness not only for human errors, but for all the distance man creates when he forgets who he is. He interceded for everyone, and the echo of his voice traveled through time, crossing generations until it reached us, still asking, "Remember who you are." The Father responded in silence, not because he was distant, but because the answer was already within the Son. Prayer was a dialogue, not a monologue. It was a mirror, not a wall. The Spirit of the Father moved within him, and silence became an unspoken word. This is the dimension we lose with translations, the dimension of spiritual vibration. Aramaic is more than language, it is frequency. Each syllable has a sound field that affects consciousness. When Jesus said Amen, it was not just Amen, it was so it is, and so it will be, because it is already in God. It was the complete certainty of unity. It's impossible to understand the original prayer with just your eyes. You have to hear it with your soul. Jesus' words weren't religious discourses, they were spiritual transmissions. Therefore, those who heard them felt their hearts burn within them, like the disciples at Emmaus. The power wasn't in the sound, but in the presence it carried. And perhaps this is the most profound revelation. Jesus didn't pray to change circumstances. He prayed to align the visible world with the invisible. When the earth harmonized with the heavens, the miracle naturally occurred. This intimacy between the Son and the Father is the model for what we are called to live. The original prayer was not meant to be repeated mechanically, but to be experienced in the heart. Each of us can enter this same sacred space where the Spirit breathes together and God's name is once again spoken with love, not fear. Abwûn de Father of all that lives. Even today these words remain alive, waiting for someone to say them with the same fervor as the one who first spoke them. What if we could hear Christ's voice again in his own language? Perhaps we would realize it has never been silent, that every time we pray sincerely, the same sound vibrates in the invisible. The same wind of Galilee still blows among the mountains of the soul. For the Son still speaks, and the Father still listens. There are mysteries that cannot be explained, they can only be felt, and the power of sacred words is one of them. Before there were temples, dogmas, and books, there was sound, the primordial vibration that broke the eternal silence and made light exist. And God said, and what was empty was filled with life. From the beginning, the universe responds to sound. Every atom vibrates with the echo of that first voice. That is why, when Jesus prayed in Aramaic, it was not just language. It was recreation. Each syllable was a movement of the Spirit, each sound a breath of eternity. His words didn't just ask, they created. Aramaic is a living language, shaped by the heart and not just by reason. It's as if each word were a flame, and each sound a wind that makes it dance. When Jesus said Abwûn de Maya, he didn't just speak to the Father, he vibrated with the Father. The sound traversed invisible dimensions, echoing between heaven and earth. Aramaic doesn't separate matter and spirit, it unites. It carries an ancient wisdom, where the word is energy and the voice is a divine instrument. Unlike modern languages which describe Aramaic manifests, it doesn't explain the mystery, it awakens it. Imagine the moment the Son uttered the words that gave rise to the Lord's Prayer. It wasn't a sequence of rehearsed phrases, but a vibrational chant. Each phoneme, each breath, carried a creative intention. The sound of Abwûn isn't just Father, it's the very movement of the breath of life. In Aramaic, Ab comes from the root meaning origin, and Wûn is the flow of the Spirit. Together, these syllables generate an energetic field of union. In saying this, Jesus wasn't asking for presence, he was revealing that presence already existed. It was the prayer that reminds the universe of its own center. There is an invisible power in every word spoken with faith. And Aramaic enhances this because each sound is a spiritual gesture. In Nethkadesh Shmak, hallowed be thy name. The root, Kadesh, means not only holiness, but vibrational transformation. It is the act of raising something ordinary to its divine frequency. Thus, when the Son spoke, the very air around him changed. The atmosphere shifted, as if the space recognized the speaker. The sound became light. This is why those near him felt peace without understanding why. It wasn't the content, it was the vibration. In all ancient cultures, sound was seen as a creative force. The Egyptians called it heka, the Hindus mantra, the Hebrews davar. But it was in Aramaic that this force became a relationship. Jesus didn't use words as magic formulas, but as channels of communion. He knew that sound doesn't exist merely to be heard. It exists to transform. That's why he said, "My words are spirit and life." He wasn't exaggerating. His speech carried the same power that made the cosmos rise. Each time he spoke the Father's name, creation breathed anew. The disciples felt it. Some said that when he prayed, the air seemed to move, as if the wind itself heard him. Others swore that the light changed, that the environment became clearer, more serene. It wasn't hypnosis or myth, it was attunement. The universe recognized the sound that called it into existence. The power of Christ's words came not from their form, but from the truth behind them. He spoke what already was, and when the word expresses what is real, it creates. Faith is this bridge between sound and substance. Aramaic possesses sounds that touch the frequencies of the human heart. It is not a language of imposition, but of flow. Its syllables have gentle curves, slow breaths, pauses that leave space for the spirit to move. When Jesus said, "Malkutak," your kingdom, the word sounded like a river, long and enveloping. In Aramaic, Malkuta is not just political royalty, but spiritual sovereignty, the state in which all is in harmony with God. The ak at the end softens, reminding us that the kingdom does not impose itself, it flourishes. Thus, the very sound structure of the language already teaches what it says. True power does not dominate, it reveals. Modern translations, in trying to make the prayer understandable, ended up making it less vivid. When the text became letters, the sound was lost. And with the sound, the vibration was also lost. There is a huge difference between reading "Thy will be done" and hearing "Newe Dzevyanak." The latter sounds like the very movement of the Spirit descending. Dzevyanak has the root of burning desire, of divine will in action, not imposition. It is as if Jesus were saying, "May your will flow through us as the wind moves freely." This nuance is vital, because in Aramaic, to want and to love are two sides of the same verb. Modern science begins to touch on what the Spirit already knew. Sound waves shape matter. A frequency can rearrange particles, form patterns, alter vibrations. If a simple human sound can do this, imagine the voice of Christ. Imagine the power of the words he spoke in Aramaic, charged with the Spirit that created everything. When he spoke, the universe listened. When he said Amen, it wasn't an end. It was a reverberation that continued to echo beyond time. The Aramaic Amen doesn't end, it perpetuates. It's as if to say, what was said now lives. And when we repeat these words without presence, we lose their power. Prayer becomes just sound without a soul. What Jesus taught was not a sequence of phrases, but a frequency of consciousness. The power lies in the intention, in the vibration, in the surrender. He never said, repeat mechanically. He said, pray like this. The like this is the key. It's the form, the spirit, the attunement. It's not about imitating the sound, but about embodying the state, because what transforms is not the spoken word, but the energy with which it is spoken. Aramaic teaches this in its structure. It is a circular language, not a linear one. Its phrases return to their point of origin, as if everything ended where it began. It is a reminder that everything in the divine is a cycle, not a line. When Jesus said, "Willa talan la nesyuna," lead us not into temptation, he was not asking for escape from evil, but for awareness of unity. Nesyuna means test that reveals what is true. Thus, prayer is not about avoiding the challenge, but about staying awake within it. The power of Aramaic lies in this. Every word contains its opposite and its complement. Every sound is shadow and light in harmony. There are records of monks and scholars who have attempted to restore the original vibration of the Lord's Prayer. Some claim that when sung in Aramaic, the entire body responds. The heart slows, the mind becomes silent, the energy field expands. It's as if our very DNA recognizes those frequencies, like ancient memories of the soul. Perhaps because somewhere within us, the echo of the voice that said, "Let there be light," still resonates. Christ's word awakens the same word within us. We are made of the same sonorous substance he spoke. And this is what differentiates repeating from living. To repeat is to echo without a soul. To live is to let the sound become flesh within us. When Jesus prayed, he became what he said. He didn't say, "Our Father." He was the Son in full communion. He didn't say, "Thy will be done." He became the will. He didn't say, "Deliver us from evil." He radiated light that dissolved evil. The words didn't come from him, they were born with him. That's why when he spoke, demons fled, winds ceased, hearts burned. Creation obeyed because it recognized the original sound, and this is the lost secret. Sound creates. Every prayer is a sound seed sown into the realm of the invisible. Every word spoken with faith shapes realities. What we speak becomes what we live. Christ revealed this when he said that faith moves mountains, because faith is a verb, a vibration, a spiritual action. When the Son prayed, he did not imagine, he manifested. And Aramaic was the perfect channel for this, for each syllable aligned with the rhythm of creation. His words still echo, sustaining the universe like a song that never fades. Therefore, when we think of the Our Father, we should not see it as a prayer, but as a portal, a vibrational code that reconnects us to our origin. Each sound is a key, and each phrase a passage. Abwûn de Boishmaya opens the heart. Neth Kadash Shmach elevates the soul. Tete Malkutach awakens consciousness. Lachmad Sunkanan Yaomana nourishes the spirit. Wabashlan Chaubain liberates. Wilatalan Lanesyuna protects. Elapatsan min Bisha purifies. Metal dilaki malkuta wahaila wateshbukta. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, seals the circle back to the source. Everything that exists vibrates. Everything that vibrates responds to sound. And the words of Christ in his sacred language continue to vibrate to this day. Even when the world falls silent, we may not hear them with our ears, but they continue to call, remind, awaken. The hidden power of words lies not only in what they mean, but in what they are, divine energy in the form of sound. There comes a time when the soul tires of repeating what it doesn't feel, when the lips speak, but the heart remains silent. It is at this point that many turn away from prayer, believing that God has fallen silent, when in fact it is we who have lost the language of the soul. Modern man has learned to pronounce sacred words, but has forgotten to hear the divine sound behind them. He has forgotten that prayer is not asking, it is remembering. It is returning to the original vibration, where all is communion. It is rediscovering the Father within silence itself, and it is at this point that Aramaic breathes again, not as an ancient language, but as a living bridge between the human and the eternal. Rediscovering Aramaic is rediscovering the heart of prayer. It's not just about understanding the literal translation, but about feeling the energy that pulses in each syllable. The words that came from Jesus' lips were not rituals, they were pulses of life. When he said, Abwûn de Boashmaya, the vibration of the sound traversed space and touched the depths of those who heard him. It was as if the air itself became conscious. It was not just the invocation of a distant God, but the awakening of the God within. Christ did not speak on the Father. He spoke with the Father. And it is this secret that time has tried to hide, but that the Spirit insists on revealing again. The return to living prayer begins with a decision to stop repeating what is not lived and begin to live what is prayed. When Jesus taught the Lord's Prayer, he wasn't creating a formula, he was delivering a frequency. He showed us the way to enter into presence, the rhythm of the word that opens portals. Praying as he prayed is learning to breathe together with God. It is aligning the sound of our voice with the beat of the universe. Therefore, those who return to the original vibration of Aramaic feel something that no translation can explain. It's as if the heart remembers a forgotten language. Words touch places that reasoning cannot reach because they are not words, they are pathways. Living prayer is a spiritual seed. When planted in silence and watered with faith, it blossoms into transformation. What was once only sound becomes light. What was once only speech becomes life. It is at this point that the mystery is fulfilled. The word becomes flesh within us again. Jesus didn't invite us to repeat what he said. He invited us to be what he was. He didn't say pray, but pray like this. And the like this is the mystery. Just as those who love speak tenderly, just as those who trust surrender, just as those who know the Father don't need to convince him, they simply reconnect. The return to living prayer doesn't happen in temples, but within. It doesn't begin in the voice, but in the soul. It's when the heart once again vibrates in tune with the Spirit, when each spoken word becomes an offering, not an obligation, when the Our Father ceases to be a memorized sequence and becomes a state of consciousness. At that moment, the entire world transforms, because what changes first is the gaze. The soul begins to perceive the divine in everything, in the stones, in the wind, in the gaze of a stranger. Living prayer awakens this silent perception. The kingdom will not come. It is already here, waiting for us to see it. Those who learn to pray as Jesus prayed discover that the sacred is not external, but flows through everything. Aramaic teaches this without words, only through sound. Its vibrations invite surrender, not control. Each syllable is like a step toward the source. It is a language that does not demand perfection, only presence. When we pronounce Nethkadash Shmach, we feel our hearts open. When we say Tete Malkutach, we realize that the kingdom is not a place, it is a state. And when we murmur Wulatalan Lanes Yuna, we understand that even temptation is merely an opportunity to remember who we are. Sound guides the spirit, and the spirit guides life. But it takes courage to truly pray. Because living prayer transforms. It doesn't confirm our wills, it reveals God's will, and this revelation isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it breaks what needs to be broken, removes what impedes the flow. It is fire and it is balm. When Christ prayed, he didn't run from the cross, he transmuted it. And this is what happens to those who truly pray. Pain ceases to be punishment and becomes passages. The soul that learns to pray like the Son discovers that even suffering can be sacred when experienced in communion with the Father. Living prayer is the opposite of haste. It arises from presence. It is silence that breathes, time that expands. When the heart enters this state, sound becomes secondary because what truly speaks is vibration. The words of Aramaic are merely the outline of a much greater energy, moving between sound and silence. Jesus knew this. That's why, when he withdrew to pray, he didn't bring speeches but surrender. His prayer was communion, not performance. And what he sought was not to convince God, but to remember that he was already one with him. This is the essence of living prayer, the return to unity. With each generation, the Spirit calls some back to this source. They are those who feel something is missing in the repetitions, who realize there is more between the letters than meets the eye. They begin to search for the original sound, the lost vibration. And little by little, they realize that the sacred language never died. It simply fell silent, waiting for those who knew how to hear it. Because the Aramaic of Jesus does not belong to the past. It continues to vibrate in every heart that yearns for the eternal. It is the language of the Spirit, the language of love. And love never forgets to be understood. When a soul rediscovers this language, something awakens within. Fear gives way to trust. Doubt transforms into surrender. The world, which once seemed chaotic, reveals its silent order. Everything returns to its axis. Living prayer does this. It reorganizes the invisible. It changes not only what's around, but what's inside. And when the inside changes, the outside responds. The universe is a mirror. Therefore, when the soul returns to praying as Jesus prayed, the world aligns with the sound of faith. The impossible begins to move. The peace he promised ceases to be a concept and becomes a state. The return to living prayer is also a return to simplicity. Christ never asked for complex rituals or formulas. He asked for presence, purity, and love. The true power of prayer lies not in the volume of the voice, but in the truth of the intention. A single word spoken with faith is more powerful than 1,000 spoken distractedly, because God doesn't listen to the sound, he listens to the heart. When Jesus prayed, the Father already knew him. The word merely opened the channel, so it is with us. Living prayer is not about telling God what we need, but about reminding us that he is already everything we need. There is something profoundly liberating in understanding this, because suddenly prayer ceases to be effort and becomes breathing. Praying becomes existence. Every gesture, every look, every silence can be a prayer. Work becomes an offering. Fatigue becomes surrender. Mistake becomes learning. Everything experienced with awareness becomes a dialogue with the divine. This is what it means to pray without ceasing, not to repeat words, but to remain awake in the presence. And it is this state that Aramaic awakens, because in it, sound and being are one. True spiritual transformation occurs when prayer ceases to be an act and becomes a state. When a person prays, they speak. When the Spirit prays, it vibrates. At this point, the separation between heaven and earth disappears. The soul becomes a temple and the body an altar. It is the reunion with the first sound, the one that created everything and still echoes within each of us, the one that Christ brought into human form to remind us of who we have always been. This sound still lives, waiting only for inner silence to reveal it. In the end, understanding Aramaic isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is allowing it to understand us. May its vibration touch where our words no longer reach. May the spirit of prayer return to inhabit our days. Because the language Jesus spoke is more than phonetics. It is consciousness. It is the language of love, and love is the language of God. When the heart speaks this language, there is no distance, no time, no death. There is only communion. This is why the return to living prayer is also a return to love. Living prayer is the breath of conscious love. It is the moment when the soul surrenders itself without fear and heaven bends down to listen, and the miracle happens. What was once a search becomes an encounter. What was once a separation becomes unity. What was once a supplication becomes gratitude. This is the mystery that Christ left us. Not a text, but a frequency. Not a religion, but a communion. The Lord's Prayer in its original form is the map that leads back home. Because in the end, everything returns to the beginning. The sound that began the universe still calls to us. It invites us to remember that we were created by the Word and sustained by it. That the same Word that made the light shine dwells within us. And that when the soul learns to speak to God in the language of love, no distance separates heaven from the heart. And now, take a deep breath. After going through this journey, from lost sound of heaven to the words that time almost erased, of the intimacy of the Son who spoke with the Father, to the hidden power of words, until this moment when the soul returns to living prayer, a question echoes within us. Do we still know how to pray, or do we just repeat what we forgot to feel? Because perhaps the true miracle is not in hearing the voice of God, but in rediscovering the vibration that makes us recognize Him. If this message touched something within you, something the world had silenced, but the Spirit has just awakened, leave a comment saying, "I want to learn to pray like Jesus prayed." Your like and subscription help this light reach other souls who also need to remember the sound of heaven. The verb still lives, and the Father still answers.